Welcome and/or welcome back to my channel. My name is Dawn Tracy and I am back with another Monday morning devotional video. Today, I'm going to be talking about finding thankfulness in your heart even when you don't feel like it. So we're here in this season of Thanksgiving, and many of us find ourselves in positions where we really are not in the thankful mood. I'm coming out of this season where accessing thankfulness in my heart was very difficult. For me, I was just filled with lots of disappointment and betrayal and questions and doubts that I was really trying to work my way through. And so when it came time for Thanksgiving as a holiday, I felt like I was showing up in a very inauthentic and fake way. I was smiling, I was present with family, present with friends, but there was something that just felt fake because I knew that I wasn't able to show up as my full self. But God really has taught me some things about that season now that I'm looking back on it. And one of the lessons that He showed me was really how important it was to still find some type of thankfulness, even though I was in a challenging season. We fall into this trap of thinking that if we're not 100% real in our praise or in our thanksgiving, that it's not enough. Sometimes we're just going through a tough time, and so we're just trying to push through and find thankful words and find praise, even though we know that it's not the most authentic place that we've ever been in our lives. But in doing that, we're actually not giving up. So I'm going to use Psalms 9 verses 1 through 2. I just want to use these two verses to really just talk about 4 ways that we can practically do that. So as I was studying Psalms 9 to prepare for this video, one of the things that first stood out to me is that each statement in these first 2 verses start with "I will." It was repetitive, and I know from my studies that whenever the Bible repeats something, there's an emphasis there. There's something that we should pay attention to when it's been repetitive. And so the fact that David repeated this "I will" statement in so many times in these verses, I thought, okay, what's going on here? So I looked at the Hebrew, and what I found was that the "I wills," they had a certain emphasis behind them. The emphasis that David gave it was almost as if there had to be a level of intentionality behind it. That first "I will" there had a certain causal aspect to it. It's almost like David was saying, I will cause myself to give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. Like if I can't just fall into it or stumble into it, I will cause myself to do it. I will push myself to do it. I will commit myself to doing it, right? It's a causality to it. And what that lets me know is that we have to choose to give thanks to God. It does not mean we will always feel like it. It also doesn't mean it would always feel authentic. It just means that we have to choose to do it. I will cause myself to give thanks to God with my whole heart. My whole heart ain't in it right now, but I'm going to push and I'm going to try and I'm going to fall before God in whatever capacity that I can, and I will cause myself to give thanks to the Lord. That's what that feels like to me when I read David's words here in that first verse. Now, the second "I will" that David says there, that one's different. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds. In this part of verse 1, it's an intensifying to the action, right? Again, intentionality. We see this form of the Hebrew word used when there is a repetition that is meant to create intensity. We also this form of the word just means like an intense action, a more intensified action. And so this recounting is, again, intentional and intense, right? I will recount your wonderful deeds. So maybe a better way of saying it is, I will recount your wonderful deeds. And then in verse 2, that "I will" is again another intensified action. So we see this repetition that starts off as a causality, a causal verb. I'm going to cause myself to give thanks to the Lord. And then that verb that intensifies, then I will recount your wonderful deeds. And then here again, he says, I will be glad. I will sing praises. And so there is, again, something that's intentional about David's words here that I feel, based off of the form of the verb that he used in the Hebrew, that he is creating space for. You might not feel like it. I might not always feel like it, but I will still do it. So that's the first thing that really stands out, is that you have to choose it. You have to be intentional, and it's okay that you don't feel like it. Still choose to be thankful and to give thanks to the Lord. And the next two things that I want to point out are found in verse 1. The first is that he does it with his whole heart. So this is a full, embodied, holistic commitment to give thanks to the Lord. Even if it feels like you are only doing it halfway, the commitment and the intentionality behind it has to be with your whole being. Again, it doesn't mean you're gonna feel good. It doesn't mean you're gonna feel like doing it. It just means that you choose with your whole being to still give thanks to God. And he's using that causal verb again there, right? I will, it's causal, talked about that already, but praise you with my whole heart. He also uses the verb of praise in a causal way, like a causal action. I'm going to cause my whole heart to praise you, is what David is saying. That kind of communicates to me that you still have some level of dominion over your emotions, some level of power over your emotions. And this is coming from a therapist. I 100% understand that we are not always able to have a certain level of control of our emotions. There are some emotions that are automatic. We can, however, exercise control, power, and dominion over the actions that follow the emotion. I may not be able to help the fact that I'm sad, but what I can do is choose to still posture myself with praise, even though my heart is sad. And so you may feel like your emotions are out of your control, but your actions, the next step after the emotions, are not out of your control. You just have to figure out how do I push myself to a point of intentionality to still find thanksgiving and thankfulness in my heart. The next thing that stands out to me in verse 1 is the recounting of your wonderful deeds. And this kind of helps me to understand that sometimes finding thankfulness in our heart isn't always about the present. Like, let's be real. Sometimes what's happening in the present sucks. It don't feel good. We don't like it. We don't want our current circumstances or situations. And so we have to recount. Sometimes we got to think about the past, what God has done for us last year, the year before, sometime in the past, and recount those deeds, those marvelous works, which is another word we can use there for that Hebrew word. I'm going to recount your marvelous works from the past, and I will pull thankfulness out of that. My current situation might suck. My current situation might be hard, but in the past, God, you performed a miraculous, marvelous, wondrous work in my life. And I will think about those things, and I will find the thankfulness and the praise in that. That's what David is saying there. Now, the last thing that stands out to me in these verses is that all of the emphasis is on the character of God and who he is. Sometimes when we talk about Thanksgiving and just this time of year, we are being thankful for things that are in our lives, kind of like the more materialistic things, the people, the places, the things. We are encouraged to find thankfulness in the nouns that are in our lives. But for some of us, those nouns, those people, places, or things can sometimes be the root of the pain that we feel that's making it so difficult to find thankfulness. But in these verses, David is finding thankfulness by thinking about the Lord and who he is and his works and his character and his heart. Those things are leading David to find praise and thanksgiving in his life. And so that's my last really encouragement for you is think of the Lord. Think of the things of the Lord, not just the past, but even the present. The things that are small that we don't think about, that we don't consider, that feel small under the weight of our pain, that feel small under the weight of our heartache and our anxieties and our fears and our grief and our loneliness. These things feel small under the weight of all of that. But those small things are actually shining light on who God is. Those small things still show that God loves us and that God is near to us and that God is still working in our lives. I've heard it said that if you are still breathing, God is not done with you. If you are still breathing, there is still joy and contentment and peace and love that you can experience. If you are still breathing, this pain is not the end of you. As we are trying to figure out how to experience some level of thankfulness, even when we don't feel like it, sometimes we have to think of the small things because they help us to remember the character and the nature of God. So our thankfulness is targeted toward who we believe God to be. And if you're not sure who God is, he shows us who he is and his character and his nature throughout scripture. A good place to start is the Gospel of John. And so our thankfulness doesn't always come from what we tangibly have. It comes from who we have, which is Jesus, which is God. So in this Thanksgiving season, I know that some of you are having a very difficult time. But my prayer, even right now, is that God will help you to find that thankfulness in your heart. But even more than that, he will show to you that he truly is indeed the comforter. He will show you that he truly can give you the peace that surpasses all understanding. He will show you that he can be your refuge and he can protect you from those who want to cause you harm. He can show you that he can free you from the bitterness and the anger and the depression and the anxiety. That he will show you that he is powerful enough to pluck you out of the hands of the enemy, that he can restore to you the joy of your salvation. He will show to you that he can give you all of that peace and contentment and love that you've been searching for. He is that God. And my prayer is that you will be able to experience him in that way. And that in the meantime, he will give you the grace to find thankfulness in your heart. So I pray that he will sustain you through this holiday season, that even though it feels hard and it feels heavy for some of you, that you will take his yoke upon you, because his yoke is light and it is easy. He will take that heavy burden yoke off of you and he will give you his. So thank you for joining me for this Monday morning devotional video. I pray that it did bless you. Check out these other videos on my channel. I pray that they also bless you, and just know that my heart really is for you throughout this time of the year. So I will see you back here in 2 weeks with a whole new video, and I pray that all will be well with you until then. I will see you later.